DTFF.
Once again, here's Drinking and Talking Fantasy Football with your host, Jake Trowbridge and Dustin Lunt.
Welcome back to DTFF, everyone. Happy Tuesday evening. Coming out of an exciting week 3 of NFL football. I know us as Packer homers had a very exciting game on Sunday. It's very exciting to see our team come back from a very large deficit and eke out the victory at the end of the day. But we don't need to wax too much about that, Jake, unless you want to. Jake, my co-host with the most.
I always want to wax about that. It's the only waxing I want to do most weeks, but we will spare our listeners from that. Overall, though, pretty fantastic week outside of even the Packers realm. If you rostered a single Miami Dolphin, congratulations on probably winning your week because everybody who played got it done there, and plenty of other excitement as well. But that one, that was something special.
That game was bonkers. Absolute bonkers. And then I saw that the line for the Chicago-Denver game this week is the Bears at -3.5. So the Denver giving up 70 points is still favored against the Bears this upcoming weekend, which tells you the sorry state of affairs that the Bears are in.
It's pretty damn sorry, and I'm not going to dwell or linger on just the overall badness of them, but we will be talking about some of their players coming up in this episode. That's true.
Yeah, we've got a fun one this evening. We're doing some week 4 head-to-heads, kind of a play on our Would You Rather game that we like to do periodically on the show. So this one's more specific for week 4 here, kind of giving you some of that good fantasy advice that you can actually utilize this week with your lineups. So yeah, should be a lot of fun. Should make for some good conversation here, since I doubt we're going to agree on many of these.
It's highly possible, and I cannot wait for the payoff of this, because this really is, it's like merging two of our best interests on this show, one of which, as you said, is the Who'd You Rather, and the other is our beer bets, because collectively, when we go all in on these players, and we might agree on some of them, we probably won't on many of them, the totality of that, we're going to look to see who has more fantasy points from their starts out of those duos next week. And I think we're going to take it back old school and have a beer chug payout, which we haven't seen in earnest for quite some time.
Yeah, quite some time. Yes. Before we get into all that fun stuff, though, Jake, what are you drinking this evening?
Well, this week, I don't have to chug anything. And I get to enjoy an Oktoberfest, which is what I had last week that I ended up having a chug because I forgot that I had to pay out one of my bets and I didn't bring my little shot guy. But this is an Oktoberfest from Delta Beer Lab, and it's just wonderful. What are you drinking?
Yeah, I dug to the back of my fridge, and I found this totally kind of evil. We reviewed it a few months back, I believe. This is a Doppelbock lager coming in at 8.4%. So it was good considering the rainy, kind of cool fall day that we had here today. So this fits right in with that, and I'm going to enjoy the shit out of this beer tonight.
I hope so. You've set the bar so high for yourself now. You can't go anywhere but down, I think, with that. At 8.4%, by the way, that's a big one. We should say, outside of even football this weekend, we did maybe the most Wisconsin thing possible, which is go to a beer fest. Some of you might know it as an Oktoberfest, depending on where you're from. But this is a craft beer festival tasting. So I think
all the local breweries. Yeah, that was a lot of fun.
No.
We drank a bunch. We had fun. We got ridiculous. Not too ridiculous. Not back in the day, but still had a good time. It was a lot of fun.
The right amount of ridiculous, which is what I would like to say that this week's beer bet also is, or our payout of last week's beer bet, rather. I think it's just the right amount of ridiculous. Do you want to review that one?
Well, I feel bad for us because it's like 2 weeks in a row that they've just been awful fucking bets. And we can't just blame one person because last week it was you. This time it was me. So we're both picking just bad bets.
It's terrible.
Yeah, it's just not great. So to remind everyone, we did Najee versus Jacobs. You took Josh Jacobs, Jake. Harris had 6.5 points. Jacobs had 11 points. Not great by either running back, but just slightly better by Jacobs. So
Slightly, I basically doubled the fantasy points of
it's not
that
like it
other
was a
schmo.
great outing, though. Come on.
Hey, double is double, and I stick to it. Whenever I can twist the number to better suit me, that's what I'm going to do.
Well, you continue to do that while I give you your props here, sir. Jake, you're an amazing fantasy football prognosticator / genius. Cheers.
Thank you, sir, for that, as you take what I can only assume, and any steady listener can assume, is fireball.
Fireball.
Right. I knew it. I absolutely knew it. Now, a little
Not a
bit
sponsor, but
disappointed
please sponsor us.
Yes, absolutely. Please do. Hopefully they could even sponsor this next segment. This segment, by the way, which is going to be a little bit lacking for this week. Unfortunately, I need to put out to everybody, we've hit a spot in this season where we do not have any drunk trades. Please send us drunk trades. We need them. They are our nourishment, and they make our episodes a lot more enjoyable, I think, overall. So if you're out there, if you're wondering if you should send them in, wonder no more. Send them to us at Drinking Fantasy on Twitter.
And this is the time of year where trades really should start to happen. If you feel like you are a contender, make those moves for your team to bolster your roster. Or if your team is garbage, like one of the teams I have, just sell off, fire sale. Get rid of all those scoring pieces. Get you some picks or some young talent that maybe might take a year or two to score you some points. Now's the time. Mix the trades. That's what it's all about.
This is literally the best time to trade actual physical human being players because while they're scoring points, they're on everybody's top of mind, if you will. And nobody cares about their picks right now. So go out and get those picks and get rid of those Adam Thielen types that you might have on your roster.
Yeah. So speaking of, Jake, in lieu of a drunk trade, and I'll tell you one I just made recently. It wasn't a drunk trade, and it's one of the players you just mentioned in Adam Thielen. So this is my garbage team that I am totally rebuilding on right now. I've made a bunch of moves this offseason. Got a couple 24 first, got a like 325 first now. Just totally kicking it down to the studs. Pun intended, because they are not studs on my team. But I had Adam Thielen and Robert Woods on my roster, just scoring points to start the season, which I did not think was going to happen. Total surprise. Where were these points last year when I was actually, trying for a championship? But anyway, so I traded those two guys, and I just said, I threw it out in my group chat. I said, hey, Thielen, Woods, available for cheap. They're cheap points. Come get them. So this was the offer that was given to me, and I accepted it as is. So, Jake, tell me what you think. I got a 24 third, Dontavian Wicks, and Ronnie Bell. 2 wide receivers, 2 rookies in exchange for 2 old guys.
For both Adam Thielen and Robert Woods.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't hate it, but there's a very good chance that that's because of my Packer homerism kind of falling into the fold here with Dontavian Wicks, who has looked surprisingly useful in the actual Packers offense. Who knows if that will continue once Christian Watson comes back, obviously. But he's young. He's probably at worst their wide receiver 4, you would assume, and he's going to have weeks because let's face it, none of those jackholes can stay healthy continually. So with that said, and Ronnie Bell, hey, he went out and grabbed a big key touchdown for the 49ers I saw this past week. So the point is, get anything possible that you can for those types of guys. you're not going to be getting multiple second-round
No,
picks for
I
these
was
dudes
thinking
at this stage.
when I threw that out in my group chat, I was like, if I can get a single third for each of those guys, so 2/3 for the two players, I was
Sure.
going to be happy with that. But the
Sure.
fact that I got a couple young wide receivers, will they probably end up doing much fantasy wise? Chances aren't very good.
Yeah.
But I'll take those dart throws on a rebuilding team. And
Yeah.
then if they start to produce and I don't want them, I can always trade them away and just keep making money, keep getting more picks at that point.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I don't hate that one bit. I had to think back because I just traded Adam Thielen right at the early stages of this season. I'm also having a moment in one of my leagues of just absolute fire sale that started right before week 1. I had to pull up my Adam Thielen trade to see what I even got for him and James Conner, which again is my guy for the
Very
season.
close to your
which
heart.
just makes me feel bad. I got a second-round pick, John Mechie and Michael Wilson. So I would say in the grand scheme of it, that's probably pretty comparable. And that's the type of thing you should be looking to get for these players again. So
That's right.
I like it, Dustin.
Well, thank you. Your approval means the world to me, Jake.
I knew it. I absolutely knew it. Well, I approve of the entire concept of this week's show. Maybe because I came up with it. Maybe because I thought of it. I don't know. But I absolutely love this one. So do we want to jump straight into our little head-to-head matchups for week 4?
Yeah. So basically, or Jake, why don't you lay it out? Since this is your baby here, why don't you lay out how this is going to proceed here?
Well, here's what's going to happen. I mean, in lieu of a traditional sort of start-sit episode, which let's face it, recording on a Tuesday night, it's not the most advantageous time to do a traditional start-sit episode, but we know that as you listen to these weekly, you're going to want some of these specific players, insights that we have. And again, we love the idea of doing anything head-to-head that involves a beer bet type of payout. And I also thought, rather than doing a who would you rather for the remainder of the season, let's hone this thing in. Let's, again, just focus on week 4. So we're going to go through a handful of player duos, if you will, at each position. Yes, we're even going to talk about tight end briefly. We're going to choose between those who we would rather have in our lineups for week 4. I'll try to make a pretty concerted effort not to have anybody here that's going to be overly reliant on an injury, whether their own or a teammate's, to kind of make that decision, because we're not going to have that info for at least another couple of days. So these should be pretty pure, I think, from the start.
Yeah, I like that. So, Jake, the first one you have on the show sheet here, you have Justin Fields versus Denver, which we already talked about that game in the offset, or Dak Prescott versus New England. So who are you going with on this one?
Well, I think that this is a very interesting one to decide because these are the two types of quarterbacks. If you got both on your redraft team out of your draft, it actually means you spent up at quarterback, especially in a one quarterback league. Both of these guys were top 10, certainly, I think, in redraft, and both are firmly outside of the top 10 now in season long. Neither of them are a top 15 quarterback, I don't believe, as of this moment. Dak Prescott has looked bad for fantasy. Justin Fields has looked better, but still really bad. So for me and my perspective, I go, which one of these guys can be fixed this week? It's not going to be Dak Prescott against New England. If it was any other team, I would say, sure, I could get on board with Dak Prescott. This isn't the type of matchup that I think is going to turn things around all of a sudden. Justin Fields, if they finally commit to letting him run like he actually got to last week, it was only a couple of times. One was just a broken play that he took off for, and one was a designed run. If they let him do that more against Denver, who, again, we just saw be absolutely miserable against the Miami Dolphins, I like Justin Fields' odds here, so I'm going to take Justin Fields. Who do you have?
Yeah, you make a very compelling argument there, Jake. This one's tough. I'm not going to lie. Like, initially I was like, oh, I'm going to take Dak, even though I know the New England defense is stout. I mean, they always have a solid defense every year. And I think I'm going to stick with Dak. I just like the offensive weapons better. I know it's a tougher matchup. I just don't trust Justin Fields. And this is coming from a guy that took him as my quarterback in redraft this year. And I benched him for the team they're playing against in Russell Wilson last week. And I'm going to continue to bench him for Russell Wilson until I actually see him putting up those gaudy fantasy numbers again. He looks so broken. That whole offense looks broken. So give me the offense that I think can perform a little bit better, even against a better defense. I mean, you got CD, you got Jake Ferguson, you got Tony Pollard. I mean, they've got the weapons there. It's just a matter of time before they put it together, and why not this week? So give me Dak with the better weapons around him.
All right, our first split already, and we're only one in. I do love to see that. I'm going to break in here with a question from the chat real quick. Ryan in the chat. What's up, Ryan? Asking our opinion on a trade that just went down in redraft. Traded away Garrett Wilson for Calvin Ridley. Is this a W? Dustin, would you rather have, for the rest of this season, Garrett Wilson or Calvin Ridley?
I would probably rather take Ridley the rest of the season. We saw week 1 what the ceiling is. Wide receiver, whatever it was, like wide receiver 5 for the week or whatever. We've seen what the ceiling is. We know, yes, Jacksonville's taken a little lumps here, and they haven't looked great the last couple of weeks. I think they'll turn that around. They've got too much talent to be that bad of an offense all season. So I think Ridley is the better choice here. I just don't trust Zach Wilson or anyone else that they may throw out there on the Jets to support Garrett Wilson. He'll have his weeks here and there, sure. But I think by the end of the year, Ridley will probably end up more points than.
Yeah, I'm going to lean even more confidently into this. I absolutely love this trade for you, Ryan. Calvin is an absolute smash W, in my opinion. I don't trust Garrett Wilson to do his magic act every week. That's the only way he gets points, is like literally pulling it out of his ass at this point. The Jaguars offense, I trust a hell of a lot more than the Jets offensive line, which is just in shambles. And they're not fixing their quarterback. We didn't talk about this at the top of the episode because we shouldn't, but they're planning to bring on another quarterback in New York. It is not Kirk Cousins. Don't get your hopes up. It's not even Matt Ryan or Carson Wentz. They are going back to the well for some broken ass down former Denver Broncos quarterback whose name I will not even mention on this show. They're not serious about fixing their quarterback position. So Garrett Wilson, sorry for this year. Like him in Dynasty still, but not for real.
Yep. Right there with you. All right. Should we move on to the second one here, Jake?
Let's absolutely do it.
You've got famous Jameis Winston filling in for Derek Carr this next week, going against Tampa Bay, divisional matchup. Or we've got Daniel Jones going against the Seattle Seahawks. Jake, lead us off here.
Yeah, we're talking about what people should be expecting to be a high-end fill-in, right? And Jameis Winston. We've seen him be the starter before. When he's been a starter before, he's been a more than capable fantasy asset because the dude likes to sling it. Now, more recently, though, and especially filling in just in the second half against the Packers, that wasn't really the case. He wasn't slinging it so much as he was a little bit more of a game manager. But against Tampa Bay, who got absolutely crushed against the Philadelphia Eagles here on Monday Night Football, I think that that's pretty damn enticing. Whereas Daniel Jones, I don't know, man. Week 1, bust. Week 2, bust until the second half, and then all of a sudden, top 5 quarterback. And then week 3 again, bust for Daniel Jones. So how much do we let Daniel Jones' one magnificent half of football make up for the warts that we're seeing? Seattle's not the toughest matchup. It's not Legion of Boom anymore in that neighborhood for the defense. But I'm still pretty damn scared. And I don't want to be scared for Daniel Jones because that means I'm scared for Darren Waller. You damn well know I don't want to be scared for Darren Waller. But that's the situation that I find myself in. I would rather take the revenge game of Jameis Winston versus his old Tampa Bay Bucks.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's hard to trust this New York Giants offense right now. And as high as I was on Daniel Jones and Waller coming into this year, you just can't trust this offense to do anything. And if we're going specifically QB versus QB, yeah, give me Jameis, revenge match against his former team. He's actually going to be starting. You got Chris Olave, you got Michael Thomas looks good. You got Jawan Johnson. Is Kamara back this week or is that next week?
So yep, he
Kamara's
returns
back.
from the suspension.
So, it remains to be seen how much he gets worked in, but even if he's just on the field a handful of plays, that's going to alleviate some of that pressure off of him, even as a safety valve. So, yeah, give me Jameis in the revenge match this weekend.
Love it. All right, we're back on the same page, back to square one for these. Well, let's see if we can switch it up for running backs then, shall we?
Let's.
This is a weird one.
It is. We got Derrick Henry going against the Bengals, or we got Breece Hall going against the Chiefs. I'm going to go with Breece Hall here. Derrick Henry, he's been getting outsnapped by Tajay Spears to start the season here. The Bengals, while they don't have the toughest defense in the world, I don't know. Could this be the year that Henry is dropping off, or maybe the coach there is just utilizing him differently, maybe saving him a bit for later in the season, so they're using Spears early? I don't know. But we do know that Breece Hall is the guy with this Jets offense. I am not worried about Dalvin Cook or Michael Carter or anyone else. Breece Hall's looked good in his limited action. And I know that they're going to be down against KC. Like that's going to happen. We know this is most likely going to be an L for the Jets, but I still expect Breece Hall to get his. So give me him over Derrick Henry.
Yeah, the reason that I put this one out there, I think, is because people are distraught about Derrick Henry in week 3. Because he scored like 2 fantasy points. Taylor Swift only had 2 fewer fantasy points than Derrick Henry did in week 3. Let that roll around your brain box a little bit. Breece Hall, meanwhile, I agree with you. He is the guy in their backfield when the Jets can have any guy in their backfield. It's just right now, again, the offensive line is so terrible. You called it. They will be down probably early against the Jets, against the Chiefs. Unless their defense can hold up. They do have a really good defense, the Jets do, for what it's worth. I don't know that they can stop Patrick Mahomes for very long. What concerned me is it looked like Michael Carter was getting a lot of the passing down work still. Like, you have Dalvin Cook and Breece Hall, and no disrespect to Michael Carter, but why are you out there so frequently, sir? And so I'm just hoping for the bounce back game of Derrick Henry, who I still believe will get the biggest share of the backfield. I know it wasn't that way in week 3 with Tajay Spears, but I think that this week against the Bengals, we see a little bit more of his week 2 usage, I guess. So I'm actually going to go with Derrick Henry here.
All right. Well, another one we disagree on here. I don't hate it. Like I said, that one was a tough one, but like I said, something about Derrick Henry just doesn't feel right now. And until he gets right, and I know I should never bet against him. We've said it for years. Never bet against Derrick Henry. But
why I'm banking on him.
I just can't listen to my own advice here. So, but yeah, that was a good one, Jake. I like that one. Next running back one on our list here is Dameon Pierce versus Pittsburgh, or we got Javonte Williams at Chicago. So, Jake, why don't you lead us off this one?
I think these two, and by the way, I've tried to make them as close, whether people have asked me these directly or I've seen these kind of floating about, I'm trying to make them very realistic for what the position should actually be that you're deciding between at these levels. And Dameon Pierce and Javonte Williams, neither were super high draft picks, but they were in that sort of like running back dead zone. And people still thought maybe based on volume, they'd be good. And Dameon Pierce, we thought the volume would be there right out of the gate. Javonte Williams, we thought it might take a bit. And Javonte Williams has actually gotten the volume, but the efficiency is just not there at all. The touchdowns aren't there. And it's kind of disappointing. I mean, the entire Broncos offense is pretty disappointing at this stage.
Except for Mims.
Except for Marvin Mims. And we're going to talk about Marvin Mims a little bit later, by the way. But Pittsburgh is god-awful. Absolutely god-awful. I would like to say that Dameon Pierce should have plenty of opportunity because the Texans are not going to fall behind. In fact, I expect them to lead for the majority of the game. But I was burned last week, assuming that with Josh Jacobs. Ergo, I have to make this pivot towards Javonte Williams and just hope that he finally gets a touchdown this week, because I really do think that's pretty much what's missing from his fantasy production. And that's kind of it. His usage has been great. Not afraid of the Bears at all. So give me Javonte this week.
Yep, I am right there with you. Javante's got a nice matchup against the Bears. Like you said, usage has been there. Just hasn't been able to find the end zone, whether that's a rushing or receiving touchdowns. So I expect that to change. What a matchup to make that change this week against the Bears. So yeah, I'm with you on Javonte as well.
All right, look at us back in lops. We're going every other. I think we're switching out. Let's see if that holds true for this running back pair.
Yeah, we've got Roshan Johnson at Denver, as we just talked about that game. And then Jaylen Warren for Pittsburgh going at Houston. So I don't like either of these.
This is a flex decision here. Let me put it this way. This is an absolute backbreaker if you have to do it, but people roster these guys. They've got them on their benches. Might have to use them.
Yeah. So I guess for me, Jake, on this one, if you want to go just based on last week, you should take Roshan Johnson after Denver just got torched for however many yards on the ground from the Miami running backs. I know Roshan is no A-Chain or Raheem Mostert. Those guys are, the 4-3 running backs. But I mean, yeah, I'll go with that. This could be kind of an ugly match, and Roshan has been getting more and more of the volume. As I said before the season started, I expect him to be the lead dog before too long here, and I see that shift already happening. So give me Roshan here against a defense that was vulnerable last week. You would think that they would focus on stopping the run, but we know as Packer fans, we say that every single week and it never happens. So give me the team that was just torched for, a squillion yards on the ground last week.
A squillion is not an overestimate. That is exactly how
that's
it was
fair.
listed in the stat book, I'm pretty sure. I will fall in line with you here on Roshan Johnson. I kind of thought that you would go his direction because you have been so high on him so consistently. And I'll do you one better. I think that this is the actual breakout game for Roshan Johnson. His usage has been encouraging. It's been incrementally going upwards, as it should, because he's by far the best piece in that backfield. And the fact that they aren't involving him way more already is disconcerting in its own right. But I do think they finally, whether or not he gets more splits or more snaps, I should say, than Khalil Herbert, I don't think it matters this week, like you said, against Denver. Although you better hope that Denver comes out expecting to get gashed on the ground and tightens that up, because that would be incredibly embarrassing to have happen 2 weeks in a row. But I'm not banking on it. And Jaylen Warren, for what it's worth, I like the idea of Jaylen Warren sometimes, but I wasn't huge on him coming into the season. I still don't really believe he takes over for Najee Harris. I think he's just a complimentary piece at best. And I don't like Pittsburgh right now at all in almost any capacity. So I'll go with Roshan.
Yeah, Jake, before we move on to the wide receivers, the next one here, we got a question in the chat. This is from another Jacob.
Hey, other Jacob.
Is it worth hanging on to guys like Kenny Gainwell, Justice Hill, and Cam Akers?
Well, I think that it's worth hanging on to two of the three. I'll be curious to see if you match up with my opinion on this. But Kenny Gainwell has still been splitting the work pretty well down the middle with DeAndre Swift. We saw that on Monday Night Football. Swift obviously has way more upside. He's a way more efficient running back the Eagles would be wiser, in my estimation, to use the hell out of him. But so far, they haven't been. So far, Kenny Gainwell has been heavily involved. So I think you have to hold on to him, or at least use him as trade bait in your league, rather than dropping him outright. Justice Hill, I don't really care to hang on to. I'm fine dropping Justice Hill. Cam Akers, on the other hand, he wasn't active his first week after being traded to the Vikings. Alexander Mattison had a better day, certainly, for real-life football than he'd had in previous weeks, but I think Cam Akers has a shot at the starting job, so I'd still hold on to him. What do you think?
I agree. I would hang on to those two for sure. Justice Hill, I'm a little bit warmer on him than you are, Jake. If you've got the roster space, I would say hang on to him. Just because, they've got Gus and they've got Kenyon Drake and they've got, all these guys there. But he has hung on to that roster for many, many years now. So the staff likes him there. He's familiar with the offense. He's definitely a boom bust type guy. Like, you're not going to know the weeks that he ends up in the end zone, but if you just need that running back depth and can hold on to him, I don't mind hanging on to him. But I agree with you, Jake, about Gainwell and Akers. Those guys, Gainwell's getting the usage, and I think Akers will be getting the usage in Minnesota before too long.
Yeah. And at this stage in the game, you just kind of got to hoard running backs, I think, to some extent, because they're so worthwhile. All right. Well, let's move away from running backs, though. Now, let's talk about some wide receivers. Get back to some supposedly high-flying action.
Yes. So, aforementioned Calvin Ridley going against Atlanta, revenge game. First time at Atlanta since the whole suspension and everything. And then we got T. Higgins going against Tennessee. So, Jake, who do you have for this one?
All right. T. Higgins. Everybody needs to calm down about T. Higgins. If you watched Monday night's doubleheader, or even if you just watched the Bengals game from Monday night, you saw so many drops. You wanted to hit your face against somebody else's face really hard if you're rostering T. Higgins. I get it. But much like Deontay Johnson from a year ago, drops for a wide receiver of this caliber don't matter as much as you think they do. That's why I wanted to include T. Higgins here. Calvin Ridley, also, we saw, as we already discussed earlier, we saw what he can do in the offense. Whether it was just them trying to make sure they broke out the rust or just make him feel involved in week one, whatever the case was, he can absolutely do that. I think T. Higgins, the Bengals have this tendency with their players to get them right back on the horse. I think because T. Higgins had such a terrible showing this last Monday, I think they tried to get him crazy involved. And it was Jamar Chase this past week. I think it's a T. Higgins week. This week, I'm going with T. Who you got?
Yep. And I am going to go with Calvin Ridley on this one. We got the revenge game. The Bengals offense, I still don't trust. I mean, we know what they can be, but we haven't really seen it, at least consistently, to start the year this year. And Tennessee's defense is no slouch either. Atlanta's defense, they're solid. They're better than we expected, I think, but they're not frightening people yet either. So give me Calvin Ridley in what I expect to be a better matchup than the Tennessee defense.
I feel like out of all of these that we're talking about, this could be the one that decides who is doing that beer bet payout next week. I really think it could come down to these two more than anybody else. So I'll be curious to see how this one goes. But you brought up his name earlier in the episode. Let's talk about him now.
Yeah, Marvin Mims going against Chicago. You have a lot of the Denver or Chicago players here on this list, Jake.
No, people need to know.
But yeah, Marvin Mims at Chicago. We got Terry McLaurin at Philadelphia. I'll tell you right now, I'm going Marvin Mims, hands down. He has been the wide receiver for this offense. Russell likes him. Doesn't matter about draft capital of the other wide receivers there on that team with Jerry Jeudy and Cortland Sutton. Doesn't matter. Marvin Mims, he's producing, and the Philadelphia defense is scary. They're going to get after Sam Howell. And I just don't trust McLaurin this week against a very stout Philly defense.
Can I tell you, I thought maybe this is one that I would have an easy differentiation, and you'd be like, Marvin Mims. No, I'll go with Terry McLaurin. I am not going to fall for my own trickery that I put out there. I love Marvin Mims. This is a little bit of the Roshan Johnson situation, though, of like coaching staff. Figure this the fuck out. Get this most talented guy on your receiving core more involved. It's so obvious to anybody who watches it. And I know that we're not coaches. It's easy to criticize coaches, but God damn it. This seems like a really easy time to just like make your guy your guy. Cortland Sutton's not getting it done. Jerry Jeudy's not getting it done. Mims is getting it done.
Yeah, even if it's just in the interim to give your team that spark that it needs to like give them some, a little bit more offensive juice, then so be it. Doesn't have to be long term. Until then, maybe the other guys come on board and start producing. But like, God damn it, just like, get your guy that's actually doing something involved.
It's so simple. It's so goddamn simple. But apparently not for the Broncos coaching staff. Let's go to the chat, by the way, for another question here from Tanner Nelson.
Thanks, Tanner.
Should I drop DeAndre Hopkins? And if so, should I drop him for Tank Dell or Adam Thielen? I have some pretty strong opinions on this one, Dustin, but I'll let you take the reins here first.
My mind is telling me no, but my body, no. I'm going to say no. Keep Hopkins. The Tennessee offense isn't looking great so far, but Hopkins is still Hopkins. He's still going to produce. Just give it time for the team to get right there, which could come against this Bengals defense this weekend. We don't know. So keep Hopkins. Keep your studs. Thielen, I don't trust long term through this season as Tank Bigsby gets more. Not Tank Bigsby.
Tank Dell.
No. Who the other Carolina wide receiver?
DJ Chark?
No, the rookie. The rookie.
Not Terrace Marshall.
Why is my brain?
I don't know who you're talking about. I apologize. What as he gets more incorporated into
Jonathan Mingo. Mingo.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah, I knew there was a rookie there. My brain was just fucking leaving me for some reason. So as Mingo gets more involved, I would expect Thielen to kind of take more of a backseat. And Tank Dell, I just don't trust on a week-to-week basis yet. I have like what I've seen out of him, though. Don't get me wrong. But I'll stick with Hopkins here.
I believe in Tank Dell. I believe there are better days ahead for DeAndre Hopkins as well, for that matter. I'm not advocating to drop DeAndre Hopkins necessarily. If there's another player on your bench that you're considering dropping, that might be the guy I'd prefer above Hopkins, but I am trying to get Tank Dell onto my rosters. I've seen enough through 3 weeks. Week 1, I thought, wow, look at this guy who will probably have, another 20 yards the rest of the season. Because that's just sometimes how these things go. Week 2, he comes out, does the exact same thing. Week 3, he comes out, does the exact same thing. He's so shifty. He's so phenomenal once he gets the ball in his hands. He's an outlier guy because he's tiny, like I'm tiny, but he is an outlier for the NFL. I believe that CJ Stroud and him have a connection that's going to go on for years probably. And I think they're probably just getting started, but I would rather have Tank Dell in my lineup this week than DeAndre Hopkins in my lineup this week as well. Again, maybe if there's somebody else you can drop besides Hopkins, that's fine. But I'm trying to get Tank Dell onto my roster.
Yeah, I don't hate the logic there, but I would not drop Hopkins. I would feel real bad about that.
Try to trade him. Here's an option. If you don't have somebody else you're comfortable dropping, see what you can get for DeAndre Hopkins first. Maybe package him with another running back or tight end, whatever you got. See what you can get coming back for him. Maybe do a 2-for-1 trade. That way it opens up a spot on your bench that you can add Tank Dell to.
There you go. That is the move, Jake. Good job. I like that. We got there.
Nailed it.
I should say you got there, but
it was a collective effort.
Yeah.
This one, by the way, could not have come at a better time. I loved
Yes.
that timing of the chat. So thank you for that, Tanner, because we're talking about these two.
That's right. So next up, last wide receiver pairing here. We've got Puka Ngata, everyone's favorite rookie right now, going against Indianapolis, or the just aforementioned Tank Dell going against Pittsburgh. So Jake, since you are the Tank Dell stan here, why don't you lead us off here and tell us why you're going to go with Tank Dell?
Wouldn't it be such a swerve if I just out of nowhere said Puka Ngata? For what it's worth, don't freak out about Puka Ngata either. Yeah, we saw some warts from him once on Monday night. He should have had a touchdown, honestly. He just kind of slipped up too. It would have been a garbage time touchdown, but they count. And I think that he's also going to be completely fine. So don't drop him. Don't rush to do anything crazy. But Tank Dell against Pittsburgh should continue this tradition that CJ Stroud and Tank Dell have been doing, which is he will look to Nico Collins, CJ Stroud, that is. If Nico Collins is even close to being covered, he looks away from Nico Collins and goes straight to Tank Dell and just says, well, do something with it once I get this to you. It's a little bit of the Deebo Samuel type of thing that we saw in his great year. Tank Dell is, again, much smaller than Deebo Samuel, so it's not a perfect comparison, but Tank Dell, I would be shocked if he doesn't end up with a nice, cool 70 yards, minimum against this Pittsburgh defense.
Yep. And Jake, we are going to disagree on this one. Give me Puka. He is the man right now while Cooper Kupp is out. The Indianapolis defense does not scare me nearly as much as it did a couple seasons ago. So give me the guy that's, getting 35% of the targets in his offense. As you said, some warts this last week, but nothing that is too much to be afraid of. And I'll just take the guy that's getting the volume right now. So give me Puka this week.
I just really wanted to do a Puka versus Tank because they have the coolest names currently in the NFL, and they're both rookies to boot. So that's nice.
To boot. All right, let's finish this off with a tight end. Only one tight end one. We won't, get it too gross here for too long. But we've got Hunter Henry at Dallas, or George Kittle versus Arizona. Jake, lead us off for this last pairing here.
Gotta say, this isn't something that anybody should have been anticipating asking in week 3 when you were during your draft night. But here we are, and Hunter Henry last week came down to earth just a little bit, mostly because he didn't get a touchdown. And Hunter Henry, as good as he's looked in that offense, and he is at least, at worst, I guess, the number 2 target in that offense, it's still going to come down to touchdowns. And Mac Jones has mostly been delivering, shockingly. But George Kittle is going against this Cardinals defense. If you recall, this was like a running joke for a long time. Always start your tight end against the Arizona Cardinals. Hasn't really been the case this year, though. And George Kittle has not been George Kittle so far. Last week was the best that he was. And guess what? Brandon Ayuk was out. Brandon Ayuk, this is the one that kind of hinges on injury. I do think Brandon Ayuk plays this week, though. Because of that, Hunter Henry, welcome to my lineup, and I'm hoping for that touchdown.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. Well, I wanted to say George Kittle. Arizona hasn't been nearly as bad against tight ends as they were last year. And let's be honest, Brock Purdy doesn't look to George Kittle first. He looks to Ayuk. Or if it's McCaffrey, those are the two guys he's going towards. This isn't Garoppolo where he was looking for Kittle as one of his top options here. So give me Hunter Henry, the guy that's getting the volume. Dallas, they lost a major piece on their offense for the season, which does hurt them. So their secondary is slightly thinner than it was. So I think that could open things up a little bit for him. So yeah, give me Henry this week.
All right. So we tally this thing up here. We're split on a few. We're joined on a few. So join us next week as we recap those. This might be something we filter back into the show from time to time, just depending on how this one goes. But
so, Jake, just for clarification here, is this just a running total for the week? Right. Whoever wins the most has to do the beer bet. or chug the beer.
Total fantasy points
Total.
is how this is going to be decided. So we will tally up everybody's fantasy points in full
All right.
PPR, of course, as is our way. If somebody ends up not playing at all because of injury, we will
Different story, right?
Go ahead and take that one out. But otherwise, yeah, we'll do the total points next week.
Okay. All right, then. Well, let's look ahead then to week 4 here. Even though I know we just did a bunch of week 4, Jake, give me one matchup that you're really looking at that is going to give us some really great fantasy goodness.
Oh, fantasy goodness. I was kind of hoping for fantasy disasters that we would get to talk about in week 4, because there's a lot of those that I see. But I am kind of sickly hoping for a major shootout here if we look towards a little bit later in the afternoon on Sunday. If we just go ahead and turn our attention to the Cardinals and 49ers, I know it's gross, but Joshua Dobbs, I have to give this guy a lot of credit. Joshua Dobbs has looked pretty phenomenal these first 3 weeks for being kind of tossed into the Cardinals lineup right before the season started, basically. Very little training, very little prep time. So I'm hoping that he can deliver against the 49ers. I don't think it'll be the case. I'm very curious to see what Hollywood Brown can do, though, this week. I still think he's going to get a ton of targets. It's probably going to be a Zach Ertz week, if I had to guess. But I'm also just hoping that Brandon Ayuk comes back and absolutely smashes here against the Cardinals. What are you looking at?
Yeah, I'm looking at an afternoon game as well. It's the Chargers-Raiders. I want to see what Quentin Johnston does here with Mike Williams now out. I know we didn't talk about it at the top, but out with ACL injury for the season. The poor guy just can't catch a break because he was looking solid again to start the year, like looking really solid. So I'm really interested to see how Johnston does here, stepping into the Mike Williams role a little bit quicker than I think anybody anticipated him to against a defense here that should give up points.
Yeah. And for what's worth, this might be a Josh Palmer game as well. Who knows? We'll see how quickly they throw the rookie into there. Josh Palmer last week, at least after Williams went out, he was pretty heavily involved, but always hard to say if that's just because it happened during the game or not.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Well, we've done enough talking about week 4. So let's get into our starts of the week here. Jake, recap last week. You had Josh Jacobs with the 11 points that we talked about as you won your beer bet. Ended up as RB20.
Terrible.
Not great, Bob. Not great.
Nope.
Do you know what was even worse than not great? Was my pick of Calvin Ridley going against Houston defense that I thought was going to give up a bunch of points. Only 7 points for Calvin Ridley at wide receiver 66. So not great at all here. So who do you have going in for this week as your start of the week?
All right, this week I'm going to try to make this. Why am I deciding to go back to the same team then that burned me last week? Well, I'll tell you why. My start of the week in Jacoby Myers is a lot of what you talked about for your preferred matchup. That's why I held back on it just a little bit. Didn't want to give too much away out of the gate. But Jacoby Myers going against the Chargers. Not only do the Chargers currently give up the most fantasy points to wide receivers as a group, but you have to really love what you've seen from Jacoby Myers in the 2 games that he's played. He was inactive in week 2, but he has 22 targets still for 2 games played. Has at least 80 yards in both of those contests. Look, I talked a lot coming into the season about how much I love Devontae Adams because unlike guys going around him like A.J. Brown, it was always going to be the Devontae Adams show, and nobody was ever going to get in his way. That's still kind of true. Devontae Adams is still obviously going to get his, but Jacoby Myers is no slouch with the absence of Darren Waller or another true pass catcher in his mold. So I love this to be, as you talked about, maybe a little bit of a back and forth game here. And I think Jacoby Myers is pretty much a lock to finish top 25 at worst. And I think he could do top 15 pretty easily in this matchup.
I like that. My start of the week this week is Kenneth Walker III going against the Giants. We've seen the Giants just playing some very poor football right now. Kenneth Walker has been getting the volume, and we all like a Charbonnet there, but Kenneth Walker is getting the volume right now. He hasn't really been able to find the end zone so far, but I do see that changing, and I think he's going to be a great start for you this week against the Giants.
I love it. He's going to be in my lineup without a doubt in my home league. Before we get even a little bit further, let's head over to the chat once again. So, question here from the chat. A guy in my league is desperate. He wants Godwin and A-Chain for Cooper Kupp. Is that a steal? This is Dynasty. A little bit of added context here. On paper, it seems like a big steal because Kupp was a unanimous top 3 pick. But I'd like to know your opinion. Dustin, do you have a firm opinion on this one?
Oh, I think for this, I mean, if you're looking at it in a bubble for this season, if you are a contender, I would stick with Kupp because when he comes back, he's going to get his target share that he always has. And it's only going to help with Puka there as well, taking some of that pressure off of him. So if you're going for the ship this year or really think you're contending, I would stay with Kupp. But if you're not, I mean, Godwin and Kupp are the same age, I believe. They're both 28. Maybe Godwin's a year younger, 27.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think Godwin's got a year youth left in him.
Yeah. And then A-Chain, we saw the explosiveness last week out of him. So I would rather stick with those guys if I'm not like seriously contending. But if you want Kupp for those points, then take Kupp.
Yeah, here's a little bit of added additional context. Thank you for providing this. I have enough depth to cover Godwin's absence. Got Adams, Amari, Jacoby, and McLaurin. Interesting with the Adams and Jacoby pairing there, by the way. For what it's worth, Chris Godwin, you don't need much to cover his absence these days because it's been the Mike Evans show these first 3 weeks. I don't know that we're going to suddenly magically move away from that unless there's a quarterback change. I think while Baker Mayfield is there, it is going to be Chris Godwin. So for this year, and again, obviously we're not just looking at this year in Dynasty, but in this year, I would much rather have Kupp over Godwin, hands down. And A-Chain, while this is the best time probably to trade him, if you're going to trade him, you're going to get so much for him. So I understand it. I'd see if you could maybe work in a different piece there. Or if you're doing this to get Kupp, I'm fine with it. Yeah, if you're trading those 2 pieces away to get Kupp, maybe see if they'll throw in an extra pick just for the youth's sake of it with the A-Chain side, a couple of thirds or something like that. We also have a question here from Trey Davis. Do y'all think I should trade Higgins and Pittman for Jalen Waddle? So all fringe, let's see, outside the top 12 wide receivers on the Higgins and Pittman side, that kind of middle to high end wide receiver 2, depending on the week for Jalen Waddle. What do you think here? Let's assume redraft for this one.
Oof, that is a great question there, Trey. I think in redraft for this year, give me Higgins and Pittman. I think Jake, what you said, Higgins will get right, and he's going to be okay. I know he's struggled a little bit, but he'll be okay. Pittman, he's looked surprisingly good this year, especially with Richardson. I know he was out with a concussion, but considering he was playing with the rookie quarterback, he was actually very involved and looked really good. So I think having that depth for those two and a very high end wide receiver 2s, it's not like you're getting the number 1 overall wide receiver. It's not like you're getting Tyreek Hill, say. If it was Tyreek instead of Waddle, different story, but Tyreek's the man and Waddle's the number 2 there. So I don't think the trade-off is that great. So give me Higgins and Pittman.
I'm very close to wanting Waddle because I still believe he has the highest ceiling of all of these 3. But what you're saying about Pittman especially makes sense once Anthony Richardson comes back, because Richardson was the best thing for him. He's still done fine in the interim here, but once Richardson comes back, I think Pittman rockets back up. And I think he's still like wide receiver 14 in PPR format. So yeah, he's very close to knocking on that door. Waddle, and just even the injury is enough to go, well, I'll back off because the other two on this side are so good. As much as I love to free up bench space in my redraft leagues, I'll keep Higgins and Pittman as well. If that's dynasty, by the way, I would go the same. So it doesn't matter if it's a dynasty or redraft for me.
Yeah, same. All right, Jake. Oh, one more in the chat here. Just popped up here. Should I trade AJ Brown, Dak, and Herbert for Waddle, Terry, and Gibbs?
So I'm guessing this is Khalil Herbert that we're talking about here, Isaac, and not Justin Herbert. I'm just going to guess here. AJ Brown, Dak, and Khalil Herbert for Waddle, Terry, and Gibbs. Terry McLaurin, I think, is what I've been pronouncing him to be for like 3 years now. He's fine. He's a fringe wide receiver 2 type of guy in the right matchups, and that's fine. I love AJ Brown. Even though he's not always going to ball out like he did on Monday Night Football. With Dak, if this is a 1 quarterback league, Isaac, which is very important here for the discussion of Dak, I don't care I'll trade away any quarterback pretty much in a 1 quarterback league. As long as I'm getting a decent return, because you can stream the position most of the time or trade for underperformers. And then Khalil Herbert doesn't do anything for me either. It's really how much do I prefer Waddle versus AJ Brown, which is negligible, but I really do like Gibbs way more than Herbert. So I'll go with the Gibbs side. What do you think, Dustin?
Yeah, assuming this is a 1 QB league, I think I'm with you there, Jake. Because you can pick up another quarterback or stream the position and get yourself a QB1 pretty much any single week. The upside for Gibbs is there. Waddle, like you said, with the ceiling. There's not that big a difference between AJ Brown and Waddle there. I agree. I'm with you on that, Jake. We're lockstep right
there. We did it. We came back around to be in lockstep here finally. Look at us.
So then we got one more piece of business here, Jake, and that is our beer bet of the week. This week is your turn. So who do you got?
Right back to this guy. If you thought I was going to break us out of the grossness this week, boy, do you have another thing coming. I want to go to the Commanders versus Eagles game here. And I want to talk tight ends versus tight ends. Commanders versus Eagles. Now, we don't know if Logan Thomas is coming back. We don't know that. So I'm not going to do a 1-for-1 player. But, we disrespected tight ends by only having them featured once in this entire episode. So I want to bring it back. We're going to do Washington Commanders tight ends versus Philadelphia Eagles tight ends in total. So out of that group, what do you want to roll with here, Dustin?
Oh, that is gross. I guess I'll take the Eagles group.
Dustin takes Eagles TEs.
Yeah.
All right, done and done, which is really
doesn't
just
feel
Goddard
great.
and a splash of Jack Stoll mixed into it.
Maybe. I don't like it. It's gross.
I think I grossed you into making a bad decision. That's what I was kind of hoping would happen here. I actually love the Commanders tight ends, whoever is out there and active. The problem is I never know. I don't know if Logan Thomas is going to play, if Cole Turner is going to get most of the snaps, if it's going to be that other guy that gets most of the snaps. But this way I hedge against it. It's my ultimate hedge.
All right. We got 2 more questions from the chat here before we sign off this evening, Jake. So first one, we got Pollard and DJ Moore or Keenan and Pittman.
Ooh, all right, Cade. Thank you for this one. Assuming it's redraft in PPR or any form of PPR, whether half or full, I'm going to go ahead and pretty confidently go with Keenan Allen and Michael Pittman. What do you think?
Same. Keenan's been balling out. As we talked about, Mike Williams out with the injury, so more targets could be coming his way. I don't trust DJ Moore at all. So that's really the biggest deciding factor for me. And then last one, who won this trade? traded Bijan Robinson, Devonta Smith, and ETN for Justin Jefferson, Josh Jacobs, and Rashad White. Big trade. Big trade.
I do not like Rashad White at all. He had a week 2 blow up, and I kind of thought, all right, maybe I'm wrong about this guy, and he'll be relevant. And then week 3 happened. I don't like Rashad White at all. Jacobs has been way less involved than he has been any previous year. Justin Jefferson, obviously amazing.
Mm-hmm.
But Bijan Robinson and Travis Etienne, I project to have pretty consistent, usable fantasy weeks at worst. Like when they're not being top 12 running backs, and both of them can in a given week, they'll still be serviceable. With Jacobs and Rashad White, I don't know. And Devonta Smith, yeah, he has boom and bust weeks too, but I'd rather have that entire plethora of players over the other side.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Again, Jake, we're right with each other here. Just the upside of Bijan and ETN and Devonta on any given week far outweighs the Jacobs and Rashad White upside. Obviously, Justin Jefferson, one of the best players in the league. He's gold, but other than that, it's just, I don't like it. So
that's completely fair.
Just give me the Bijan side.
Love it.
So thanks to everyone. The chat was great this evening. Thanks to everyone that was popped in and had your questions. We truly appreciate it. Keep coming back next week and every other week. We'll continue to answer your questions. That's what we're here for, to give you that great fantasy advice. As always, go out, give us a subscribe, rate, review, all that great stuff. Subscribe to our YouTube channel here. You'll get the little notifications when we come live every week, so you can ask all these amazing questions. And give my partner here at Jake Trowbridge a follow on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it. Give the podcast a follow at Drinking Fantasy. You can follow me at FF Dusty Dog. Our DMs are always open for any fantasy related questions. And until next week, folks, good luck with week 4 and keep drinking and talking fantasy football.
Cheers, FFers.